Hello. Not the most ideal setup, but today we are talking all about raising laying hens, or raising chickens, specifically raising laying hens. So I wanted to bring you outside. We got lawnmowers in the back, traffic on the road, so today's going to be a little bit noisier, but I have all the props and explanations I need out here. I think you can see the coop back there. I did purchase this coop, but you don't have to purchase a coop whenever you're going to start with your chickens. They don't need luxury by any means. So the beauty of raising chickens is that there's no one right way or way to do it. So do what way works for you. Just know that there are some ways that are more ideal for the longevity of your flock, meaning that keeping them healthy will keep them living longer, and keeping them secure from predators will keep them alive longer as well. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking of your coop, what's going to be best for their health and what's going to be best, keep them free of predators. So I will be using the slides as a reference point, and these are slides that I will be doing in our local community classes. There's a bee that is interested in me and I'm not interested back. Okay, so one thing that I will talk about is chicken terms and anatomy. Whenever you're getting into chickens, you're gonna see names written on like the little cell pins for chicks in the stores, and when you're talking to your breeders and stuff like that. So just to kind of get you familiar with terms, pullet. If I was fancy, I'd put the slides up on the side, but I'm not fancy. Let me do a slideshow view for this. A pullet is a female chick. So that means they have sexed the chick and determined that it's a female. Usually it's about a 95% confirmation, but different hatcheries and different people will tell you different things. The next thing you'll see is straight run. So these are unsexed. So that means you can end up with female or male chicks. So you may end up with the rooster if you're buying a chick from a straight run selection. And then next you can see the anatomy of a chicken. So the top part that is from like their nose to the top of their head is called their comb. Different breeds have different combs. Some have that traditional spiky look, others are flatter and they're called rows or something like that. So the different shapes of the combs have different names. So just because your chicken has a more pronounced traditional looking comb like that doesn't mean that it's a rooster. It just may be the breed. And just because yours doesn't have one doesn't mean that you have a deformed chicken. It just may be their breed. The next thing is underneath like their beak and their chin area, on the top of their neck. Those little things that hang are called wattles. Again, breed specific. Usually your males are going to have bigger lower hanging wattles. Then they also have ear lobes right kind of below and on the side of their eye, and those earlobes usually indicate the egg color they're gonna hatch. So you might see silkies have blue earlobes, and that's unique to their breed, but they usually lay a more traditional cream colored egg. And then Easter eggers, I suppose, would have blue colored egg earlobes, and so they lay blue eggs. And then some of your more traditional chicken breeds will lay brown or cream colored eggs, and they'll have red or brown wattles. So that's one interesting fact too about chickens. And then all the other parts are more common. Their tush, where their poop comes out, their butt, is called their vent. Or their cloaca. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But vent is the more common term that you hear. Also in their breast region. Oh, I'm about to lose my little setup. Sorry. Also in their breast region, that is called their crop, and that is where rocks and stuff that they pick up or that you may have to supplement into their diet. Grit is called. They'll collect the grit and their food in there. Since they don't chew their food, it gets all mixed up in their crop, And so that's why at the end of the night, when you go to put up your chickens, you might notice their crop looks super big and puffy. And that usually means that they ate right before they went to bed. And so their crop is full. And that's what's going to digest and break down those food bits before they actually like send it down to their stomach. My shoes are hurting my feet. Okay, next slide. So the next thing I want to talk about were coops. So again, like I said, I purchased a coop from a guy who builds sheds. So he built me this lovely 5x8 coop. I have like 8 nesting boxes and 4 roosting bars in there. You don't necessarily need that. The requirements per bird is 4 square feet of coop space, so like where they're going to sleep at night, and 8 square feet of run. Again, there's no right way to raise chickens. I know some people who don't even have a coop for their chickens, and their chickens sleep in the trees at night. I have not experienced one of my chickens flying up in the trees, but why would they when they have a little mini castle? So you could have a traditional coop like that that's enclosed. You could also have an A-frame coop. I've seen these built with tarp and PVC pipes in like a mini tunnel form. So these give them access to grass under where they sleep. So they would just go up into the nook and sleep at night. And then they also have these like prefab ones that you can find at Tractor Supply. Those are often made of cheaper materials, and they have high price points for the longevity of those coops. So just be cautious when you're buying something like that. And then you could totally build something as well. When you're building a coop or a run, you'll need some kind of wire to keep them safe. Keep them in these like enclosed runs, they're called. Or a tractor is also a coop that is mobile, that has wheels. So that's your different terms. A chicken tractor, mobile with wheels. You move those once a day, twice a day if you can, and then your runs are just a space where your chickens are able to run and scratch and get on grass. The coop is just their enclosed space where they're sleeping at night. Okay, so then talking about wire. So there's different options when you're thinking about wire for your coops. This first one you'll see is a traditional chicken wire. I have some next to me. I have both actually next to me. So I'm trying not to close the laptop. So this is called chicken wire. So it's that hexagon looking shape. It's a lot flimsier and it's easier to work with and bend and cut. But unfortunately, it's also easier for a raccoon or a predator to be able to open up these holes and get inside your coop or your run, or to simply scratch it or bite it and break it apart. So that's a downfall of chicken wire, but it is usually a cheaper option. But thinking of longevity again, I would go with the route of hardware mesh. So these are tinier holes compared to the chicken wire. They're a stronger gauge, so the thickness of the wire is stronger. They're a little bit harder to work with and to maneuver, and you probably will need some special wire cutting pliers or tools in order to cut it to the size that you need. But it's a safer option. It's gonna last longer, and the price point when you think of it in longevity is worth it compared to chicken wire. And I don't have any kind of prices available, but like I said, I'm sure it's like maybe a $1 of price difference, or $10 in like a whole roll, and it's worth it, especially if you're building something permanent and something that you want your chickens to be safe in at night if you have high predator pressure. Okay, so we talked about different types of enclosures for your chickens, and then again, one thing I didn't get to talk about, which is one thing that I have, is poultry netting. So what that means is this electric fence in this top picture, and it's a white fencing, and it's called netting because it's kind of like the chicken wire and stuff, where it's like a squares. Let me see if I could zoom in. Okay, no, I can't. I'm not very proficient at this. But you'll see it kind of in the middle of my pasture. So those are usually sold by Premier One. That's like the standard brand that you'll hear from farmers. Because I say farmers because they also sell it for goat fencing, sheep panels. So the squares are different sizes depending on what kind of animal you're trying to keep in it. And you can also get different heights in their fencing. So when you look at that, They sell some that you can plug into your electricity source, like your house, or if you have a hookup out in your yard, you can go that route. Or they're battery operated, where you can have one battery on your fencing and one in your house charging and trade them out as they die. And then I got the solar panels. When you're getting the solar panels, make sure that you're setting up in a space with lots of sun. My previous spot for them had the coop under a magnolia tree, and my charger wouldn't even last a full day. And I will also say, because of the nature of a chicken's body, their feathers seem to prevent them from getting shocked. So I have chickens that'll just run right through it. My goose will fight my dog through the fence. So it's a very portable option for your chicken run. I will say my chickens still stay in the fence because it's just like that physical barrier. Like if they don't, if they have plenty of space to run, like right now, it's probably, let's say it's like 25 by 75 foot of pasture space. And they have no desire to cross it majority of the time. I still have chickens that will go see if the grass is greener on the other side, but for the majority of my flock, they stay within the fencing. So it's more of a don't let anything in fencing because of the electric because of the electricity. It keeps things out. So my dog, I noticed, was playing with the goose outside the fencing, and I realized the fence wasn't on. So it'll keep predators out of your chicken run more than it'll keep your chickens in. So that's my word of advice to you. Okay. Excuse me. The next thing we'll talk about is their feed and nutrition. So again, no right way to do this, but talking about verbiage, if you look at the top of the screen, it's showing the different textures of feed. So they have I don't even know that. Oh, it's a mash. So mash is usually really, really fine little crumbles of food. But then the next option is crumbles, so it's a little bit bigger. Majority of the time when you go to the feed store, you'll see a crumble and a pellet. For adult chickens, I prefer the pellet because they waste way less. When that crumble hits the ground, it will just deteriorate into the ground before they can even scratch and go find it. They will still scratch it off the ground, eat it off the ground. I know they say goats, once their hay hits the ground, they won't touch it. Your chickens will still go after your crumble, but it'll just get wasted. It'll get thrown around in spaces where they're not scratching, and like I said, it'll just fall into pieces in the ground. So a pellet is your better option for adult chickens. Now, when you're getting chicks, they're only going to offer crumble because all their little beaks can consume. So as you're transitioning them, they do make mini pellets that you may want to mix with your crumble, because some people will say that their chickens will not take to pellets right away. So that's an option for you. And so just look at your local feed stores. They usually have cheaper feed options and better feed options than like your big box stores. From when they're day olds to when they're 16 weeks old, they should be on a chick starter. They have higher protein content in them to help them grow and all the good things that they need as little chicks. And then when they get to about 16 weeks old, I would recommend wait till they start laying and then switch them to a layer pellet with a scratch mix. Again, do this to your discretion of what you want out of your flock. They sell some soy-free, corn-free feeds that also have organic options available. You're going to pay higher price points, so just pick what you want out of your birds and out of your eggs, ultimately. Other things that you can consider supplementing with is a calcium supplement. So this is especially important whenever your chicks start to come around that 16-week mark, whatever your breed is supposed to start laying, to start adding this in and just having it available in like either a chick feeder or like a little bucket or bowl in their coop, because as they're gonna start laying, their egg production system, their oviducts, I think that's what they're called for chickens, they're gonna start developing and needing that calcium to be able to create an egg. And if they don't have any source of calcium, like bugs in the ground and stuff like that, like they don't have enough forage materials that have calcium in it, then they can lay funcatated eggs, basically, that are not formed properly because they don't have enough calcium in their diet. So getting oyster shells is really good for them. You want to get something finer again as they're young chicks so that they can consume it, because I know they make some oyster shells that are a thicker granule. And then also once they start laying eggs, or if you're buying eggs from a quality source, you can also crush their eggshells and feed it back to them. And so that now that I have an established laying flock, that's what I do when I cook with eggs or use eggs. I keep the shells, keep them in the fridge, and then I just come back and feed them back to them. And then, like I said, once they're on pasture, they have a decent run with accessibility to a variety of foods, and they start eating bugs, they may need that calcium less. And if you ever see that your eggs are coming out soft and squishy, then you know that they need calcium in their life. So just start adding that supplement back into them some way. Another thing is that grit that I talked about before. Since they don't chew their food, it goes into their crop. They need something in their crop to be able to break down the food and the grass and all the things that they're eating, the bugs. So they can either find that naturally if their run space has a good selection of tiny little rocks, or you can buy what's called grit, which are like small rocks and granite. Oh, that the store will bag up for you to again have like the calcium supplement in like a little container for them to have access to it whenever they need. I used to mix it in with their food, but I felt like they were maybe overindulging in it, or overeating it when they didn't need it that much. So having it in a separate space is better in that sense. Another thing to have on deck are they make these little packs of vitamin mixes, and so those are good whenever you start noticing that your chicks are a little sickly looking, or when they go into molt, just in seasons of life whenever you think they might be stressed and they might need a little extra boost of goodness. I see some little escapees in the corner. I hope their chirping is not overly distracting. They're cute. They're trying to catch a fly on the side of the box. Another thing too, if you notice your animals get sickly and you don't have vitamins on deck, hopefully you have some good honey on deck, and so you can mix honey in the water for any kind of chick or something that just looks kind of lethargic. That honey will give them a little boost of energy, and then will provide those I can't think of a word. Antiviral properties that honey has in it, I think is what I'm looking for. So that's the laydown on feed. You can also deep dive into creating your own feed, and if your feed bill gets costly, look into allowing them to forage more, or look into soaking their feed or their grain mixes. So you can do this by putting like however many scoops of food your chicks are eating in a day in a bucket, and I just cover it with water, and then the next day you'll see it has swelled up, and so you're fermenting their feed by letting it soak up that water, and it's just going to fluff it up and allow those pellets to expand. Now that does turn your pellets into like a mush, so they may be a little bit more wasteful unless you put it in like a bucket or something for them that they're not spreading it or having on the ground. That's the kind of way that I've been feeding my chickens now that they're on a big pasture space. I want to encourage them to go to the back of the pasture rather than eating right there outside of their coop. So I've been making some fermented feed and just tossing it out to the back of the pasture, and that'll encourage them to forage back there as they're trying to sift through that feed that I threw out. There are different recommendations on how much feed your chickens need to eat a day, like per weight or something. My recommendation to you is to buy those big chicken feeders. I think they're like 2-gallon feeders. I'm not 100% positive. And just fill it up and watch their eating habits and see how much they need per day. And then, like I said, you can always scale back that feed bill by giving them supplementation feed through scraps from your kitchen. Chickens will usually avoid eating things that they're not supposed to, but you can find guidelines on what chickens can eat from your kitchen. So go that route if you're looking to save on your feed bill. Okay, I'm trying to keep this video shorter than the last. The next, I have a little graphic on eggs, what color they lay, what size they lay, and if they're a heritage breed. So these are just some of my favorite breeds and the breeds that I keep on my pasture. So Dominiques are my favorite. They are a heritage breed. They lay a brown, fairly large egg, and they lay a good amount of eggs per year. Silkies, for anybody that has kids that want to play with the chickens, they lay a really small egg and they don't lay super much per year, but I found my silkies are pretty consistent, except for in the winter they'll slow down a good bit. So maybe that's where they lack in eggs per year, but if you're living in a warmer climate, they'll probably lay fairly well for you. Orpingtons are another sweet breed that are heritage. They do lay pretty big eggs fairly consistently, so that's another good friendly breed for kids. Wyandottes and like Leghorns are high producers like the Rhode Island Reds, but they're a little bit more aggressive flighty breeds. And by flighty, I mean that if you try to go pick them up, they're not just going to sit there for you like a Silkie and let you pick them up. They're going to run away. So if you're living in an area that has high predator pressure, you want to get those breeds that aren't quite as docile or friendly. You want a breed that's going to run away, because I always joke that if a hawk was flying over trying to pick up one of my silkies, they would squat for them and let them pick them up because they're just so friendly. So get a breed that works for you, your homestead, your location, and your predator pressure, because it's going to make it all the more enjoyable. And if you don't know what you need, get a variety. That's what I have. I have almost every one of these breeds and more. So get a variety, find out what you like. I know I do not like Wyandottes because they're the bullies of my flock. And silkies, again, they're just like, I've lost so many silkies because they would just let anybody pick them up, including their top of the food chains. Other chicken behaviors that you'll notice, I talked about molting, is when they drop their feathers often as the winter ends. So they're gonna need more protein during this time, so you can buy chicken food that's like 16 or 18 or like 20% protein. So as they're going through those seasons of life, you can supplement with like scraps from your kitchen. Chickens will eat your leftover chicken. Be careful if you're like seasoning it or overly salting the chicken that you eat, but at the end of the day, like, your flock is what you want it to be. So if you want them to be your garbage disposal and you want to toss them out your chicken, and maybe you did season your chicken, then that's fine. Just understand that sometimes, like I said, it's all about what you want out of your flock and their health. Another thing that you might notice is that your chickens will be sitting on a clutch, which is a collection of eggs, basically, like about 8 to 10 eggs, and they'll sit on those eggs. When you go to collect them, they won't want to get up, and some might even peck you when you try to move them or see what's under them. And that means that they're gone broody, which means that they are under the intention of hatching out those eggs into chicks, and they're like in mama bear mode or mama chicken mode. So that is called broodiness. Another thing you'll notice, like I talked about with the Wyandottes, is pecking order. So some chickens, depending on their breed or just their age or whatever it is, their social status, they're going to be top of the pecking order, like you might hear in the human world. And so this literally means that, like, my Wyandottes are like the leaders of the flock. And I don't have a rooster currently, so this is not to say that your rooster is even going to be the head of your flock. You might have a bossy hen. Roosters are usually the top of your flock, though, so you'll have a chicken that is top of the food chain in your flock, and then you'll have some that are bottom of the food chain, like my Silkies and my Orpingtons. So, you know, the top of the food chain eats before the bottom of the food chain, and if a Silkie tries to go drink out of the water and a Wyandotte wants to go drink, she will peck them and move them and tell them, I'm the boss and I'm eating, kind of thing. So that's something you'll notice, and it's a little difficult to watch as a human, but as long as they're not neck and neck all day long, a little bit of correctioning is natural for them. Squatting, like I said, that is like when your chicken, well, like in this picture, she'll get low to the ground, and that is her way of like accepting a rooster on her back. for breeding, and you'll even notice your chickens might start doing this for you. So like I said, my silkies will squat for me. Sometimes if I get close enough to other breeds of my chickens, they'll squat for me. And this is also another way whenever you're not quite sure if your chicken is about to lay an egg or not when they're young. If they'll start squatting for you, or if you put your hand over their back and they lower themselves, that usually means that they're about to go into egg production mode, because they aren't getting to that age of maturity when those hormones and those systems are in place. Storing eggs. So whenever you collect your eggs, you really want your nesting boxes to be clean, because I literally just picked these eggs like, I guess 25 minutes ago now, before I started this video. So you want clean eggs, because then you don't have to worry about washing them. And washing them means that you're rinsing them with water with a rag, as opposed to people use soap. And when you're doing that, there's a natural bloom that forms on these eggs, which is kind of gross, but I guess I can pour some water off to the side and show you. Which I just put dirt on this egg, so it's not helping. Let's just be real. So these don't have a super heavy bloom, but when you would wet an egg and it almost looks like it changes colors, that is a natural bloom that comes from your chicken in order to protect the egg and prevent that egg, or that if there was a chicken there, from allowing bacteria to enter into the eggshell. So the best that you can avoid washing off that bloom, the better that your eggs will last. They can last at room temperature 2 weeks to a month, refrigerated, or up to 3 months or 6 months in an airtight container. At room temperature, I'm sorry, for 2 weeks to a month, or refrigerated for up to 3 months. And my recommendation is keep them on the counter. Hopefully you're eating them before they get to be like 3 months old. But if you keep them on the counter and it's longer than 2 weeks, I would usually move them to the fridge at that point. Another option to storing them is you can whisk them up or separate them out into yolks and whites, and you can freeze them that way, and they just naturally defrost in your pan as you're cooking them. I've seen people do that before. You can scramble them, cook them, and then put them in a dehydrator. You can water glass them, which includes getting lime and water, and you don't have to look up that ratio. I have 1 ounce of lime to 1 quart of filtered water, and you can put that in a big jar, and they can last like years in there, apparently, if you do it properly. Another way to check if your eggs are still good is a float test, and this float test just determines if the bacteria got in the cell. So if they float, that usually means that bacteria got into the egg, and so they're old. If they're laying flat on the bottom, they're fresh, and then if they're starting to kind of rise off the bottom, they're starting to get to the point of you need to use them or they're gonna go bad. But again, that's just if the bacteria got into there, and or if air got into the shell. So it may not be a true test, but I would need a floating egg personally. Okay, next, I'm gonna make a separate video on raising chicks, because I think we're getting to the end. I'll tell you about common ailments. Chickens are very hardy, but at the same time, they're bottom of the food chain. So getting your runs and your coops secure is going to be the best way to have a long living flock. They also need proper ventilation. So whenever you have a coop, you want to have windows or something to be able to open up and let that air in, because they have very weak immune or sensitive immune systems, so they need that fresh air, especially if they're not able to get on grass every day. Also, clean bedding. So chickens poop. It's just part of what they do, and they don't care where they poop, they just poop. So being able to put fresh bedding down is going to be major for them. They need dust baths, which is basically just going lay in the dry dirt, and they fluff up their feathers and they get that dust onto their skin, and that'll help them prevent getting mites, gnats, flies, mosquitoes, even, and lice. So if you don't have a way for them to get onto dirt, you can build them like a wood ash dust bath, or I'm sure they sell products that you can make them like a little Tupperware of something that they can go in and get that dust bath done. Egg bound, again, when their egg systems are just forming or as they're getting older, you're gonna have just some flukes, some eggs that just won't process through their system correctly. So this is called egg bound. I have experienced it before. You can let them soak in warm water and Epsom salt. You're probably gonna have to hold them under the water unless you build this cool little contraption. So you can just let them, I thought a chicken I got up there. You can just let them soak for a little while, and that can help that egg pass. And there's other ways to alleviate that, but that's just something to get familiar with. So whenever an issue does strike, you can help it. I actually had a thing called fly strike happen to my flock, and I didn't know what to do, so I Googled it really quickly. And luckily I had some sulfur on hand, and you can just like dust bathe them in sulfur. And it made the mites essentially not have any skin to be able to bite onto. Bumblefoot is another thing too. If they're jumping from a roosting barn, they're landing on the ground, it's going to impact their little pads on their feet. And that can cause bumblefoot or an infection in their foot just from that impact or something getting into the skin on their foot. So the best thing you can do is get a chicken first aid kit of common things you need. Again, I'm sure you can find a guide somewhere online. This is something I just looked up, because your chicken will never fall sick when the stores are open. It never fails. The stores are closed and your chicken is sick, and you're trying to use your human medication on them to help them. And sometimes there are things you can use, like I said earlier, honey and whatnot to help them. Sulfur I had on hand from the garden. But sometimes you just don't have that stuff on hand. So it's important to have just like the common ailment things on deck to be able to save your chicken, because it could be the difference in keeping that chicken or not. And when you have a smaller flock, it matters to be able to help your chicken, versus when you have a huge flock, you might not feel that loss as hard. So then a couple of questions that I'll just quickly run over because it's already a 30-minute video. Do you need a rooster? No, not necessarily. You don't absolutely need a rooster. They're great for protection. They're great for sustainability, to continue your flock, to get chicks. But you don't need a rooster. They also can help break up fights in your flock if you have those high pecking order bully hens who just bully for no reason. Your rooster can help referee those. Can you eat fertilized eggs? Yes, I'm pretty sure it's a delicacy in some countries. My answer to this is don't, like, chickens, I believe, take 21 days for an egg to be incubated and hatched. So if you're collecting your eggs every day, even if you have a rooster, it should not matter. If you let them sit out like 5 days, you might see a little bit of development in that egg when you crack it open. If you let it sit out for like a week or two, 21 days, you're probably gonna see a lot of development after the first week of not collecting eggs or them sitting on your counter. So if you do have a rooster in your flock, collect every day. And if you're not eating your eggs faster than they can lay them, then refrigerate them or freeze them or store them some other way than on your counter, because on your counter might be warm enough for things to continue to develop, and that is not a fun egg to crack open. Can you sell eggs? So I'm in Louisiana, and from what I looked up, you cannot use like the store cartons to resell your eggs to just anybody. So they need to be in your own cartons that are unlabeled from any certain brand, and you will have to like label them as like farm fresh or something. You can't like grade your eggs. Can chickens and waterfowl like ducks and geese cohabitate? Short answer is maybe. If you have a male duck or goose, they have parts that a rooster does not have. Roosters and chickens breed through liquids, and I don't know how to appropriately say this for YouTube. And ducks, again, drakes, male ducks, have parts that roosters do not. So if you had a male duck, try and have babies with a female chicken, your chicken would not survive that, because that is not how they were created. Now, if you have female ducks with your female chickens, that's fine. I've seen my rooster get pretty aggressive with the ducks, but I think it was because they had a drake. So there may be a little bit of fighting if you have a rooster who doesn't understand ducks. And then right now, I believe I have a female goose with my chickens, and she's getting along just fine. One thing I will say, if not for the purposes of them not being able to breed each other, causing harm to the other species, is that waterfowl are waterfowl. They love to get in water and splash and make a mess. And if that is going on in your coop, chickens do not like water. They are not waterfowl. And it could get your chickens sick, or it could just make your coop really messy and hard to keep up with. So that is something to keep in mind when you're thinking about keeping ducks and chickens together, is what genders you're keeping together, and how you're going to keep it clean and dry for your chickens. So it is possible, but there are things to be mindful of. Again, your chickens can be your compost pile. So you can literally have a compost pile on the ground. They can go and scratch it and turn it for you, or you can literally just turn your scraps into fertilizer. Now, when you're using chickens' waste for composting, it is not, I don't know the right word. Chicken compost is hot, I believe is the word. So you can't just go and take your chicken's bedding and poop and throw it in your garden. It'll kill your garden because it needs to break down for like 6 months to a year. So anytime that I put my chicken bedding into my garden, is usually I'll wait till, I used to have a raised chicken coop, and I would just get from the scraps that would fall under rather than going dig inside the actual coop. And then sometimes I would even just take the scraps and throw them in my compost, because my compost sits for a little while before it gets turned to the garden. So be mindful of that. I think that is all I have to share today. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry I'm so long-winded, but there is just so much that goes into raising chickens. Like I said, it could be as easy or as difficult as you want it to be. It can be as cost-effective or as expensive as you want it to be. So don't let anything that you hear or know about chickens discourage you from raising them. They're a great resource to have. Like I said, they can turn your compost. They can give you eggs. They can give you meat. And they can just give you entertainment. So raise chickens the way that you would love to raise them. And let me know if you have any other questions that I didn't address today. And I hope you enjoy. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments, or you can find me at backyard.babe on Instagram. And I have plenty of content on there, and my passion is sharing the fun parts of homesteading and the failures. So I try to be very transparent so everyone knows what you're getting yourself into. It's a joy, but it does have its quirks. And I believe whenever you're starting anything new, especially in homesteading, sometimes it just takes you starting to learn how to do things and what all goes into it. So don't be afraid to just start today. Have your coop ready and get those baby chicks in there, and have a wonderful, blessed spring. Thank you for watching. Until next time.